I was on the phone with Aunt Janet, laughing about some silly, mundane little thing, when I casually mentioned how excited I was for Lauren's wedding next Saturday. I'd already picked out an emerald green dress that Lauren said would look perfect next to the bridesmaid's sage green. I'd taken 2 days off work, and my gift was fully wrapped, a stunning ceramic dinnerware set Lauren had been talking about for months. Everything was set. I was ready to stand by my little sister on the biggest day of her life. Then, Aunt Janet went quiet on the other end. It wasn't a comforting, listening kind of silence. It was the other kind. The type that makes your stomach drop before your brain even registers why. I gave a nervous little laugh into the quiet. What? Did I say something wrong? 3 seconds passed. 4. Finally, Aunt Janet spoke. Her voice was so cautious, so incredibly gentle, that I knew something was terribly wrong before she even finished the sentence. Zoe, sweetie, the wedding was last weekend. I thought she was joking. I actually waited for the punchline, but it never came. I noticed you weren't there, she continued. I thought you were sick, but then your mother said you sent a gift and your best wishes. She said you had a massive emergency at work. The phone suddenly felt like a lead weight in my hand. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Aunt Janet, I managed to choke out. I didn't send anything. I didn't even know. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember my thumb sliding across the screen, opening Instagram with a hand that had already started to shake. I hadn't checked social media in days, too busy with work and preparing for a wedding that had apparently moved on without me. Lauren's profile loaded. There it was, photo after photo posted 5 days ago. The venue was a vineyard in Connecticut, bathed in the golden light of dusk. I recognized the flowers from the Pinterest board Lauren had shown me months ago. I recognized the cake, the 3-tiered design she had agonized over. I recognized every detail because I'd spent the last 18 months listening to her talk about it. Then, I saw the family portrait. My mother in a champagne-colored gown, her hair done perfectly. My father in a navy suit, beaming with pride. Lauren in a white lace dress, glowing, holding her bouquet and smiling widely for the camera. Behind them were my aunts, uncles, and cousins I grew up with. Everyone was smiling. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. There was no empty chair kept for me, no caption saying, "We missed you," or "Wish you were here." No sign that anyone had noticed my absence at all. I scrolled through the comments. Congratulations! What a beautiful couple. Such a perfect day. My cousin Megan, whom I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, wrote, "Best wedding ever," followed by 3 hearts. I kept scrolling, looking for something. I don't know what. Maybe a comment asking, "Where's Zoe?" Or a photo where someone looked incomplete, like a puzzle piece was missing. There was nothing. I hadn't been forgotten. The thought crystallized in my mind, sharp and cold. You don't forget your own sister. You don't accidentally omit someone from the guest list when you've spent 18 months discussing the wedding with them. You don't fail to notice when a family member isn't in the room. They hadn't forgotten me. They chose to exclude me and then they lied about it. I set the phone down on the coffee table and stared at the wall. My apartment was entirely quiet. The emerald green dress hung on the back of my closet door, tags still attached. The gift sat on the kitchen counter, wrapped in silver paper with a white ribbon. I'm Zoe Caldwell. I'm 32 years old. I'm a senior financial analyst at a consulting firm in Boston. I live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Back Bay. I drive a practical, pre-owned sedan that I paid off in 3 years. I have a retirement account that would make most people my age envious, because I've always been responsible. I've always been careful. I've always been the one who shows up. When my dad had gallbladder surgery 6 years ago, I took 2 weeks off to help my mom care for him. When Lauren's car broke down during college, I drove 4 hours in the middle of the night to rescue her. When my mother wanted to remodel her kitchen but couldn't get a loan, I co-signed for her. When Lauren maxed out her credit cards 3 years ago, I gave her $12,000 to clear her debt because she was too ashamed to tell our parents. I've always been the responsible one, the reliable one, the fixer. I own a lakefront house in New Hampshire. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a dock stretching out into the calm water. I bought it 5 years ago after saving for 8 years. No vacations, no designer bags, no splurges. Just a dream of a quiet place by the water where my family could gather. I bought that house for us. I imagined Thanksgiving dinners around a long wooden table, Lauren's future kids running on the dock, my dad grilling on the porch while my mom read by the fireplace. I built a shrine to family togetherness. And now I was starting to realize that togetherness might have never actually existed. The sun went down outside my window. I didn't get up to turn on the lights. I just sat in the gathering dark, replaying every conversation I'd had with Lauren over the past year. Every text about floral arrangements, every phone call about seating charts, every excited update about the venue, the dress, the menu. She talked to me about this wedding for 18 months. She asked my opinion on everything from the font on the invitations to the flavor of the cake. Then she walked down the aisle without me. I picked up my phone again and scrolled back through my texts with Lauren. Our last exchange was 2 months ago. She'd casually written that the guest list was finalized. I'd replied with a heart and the words, "Can't wait." She read it. The blue check marks were right there. She read it, and she never replied because there was nothing to say. She had already decided I wouldn't be there, and the only person left in the dark was me. My phone buzzed with a new notification, a text from my mom. "Hey, sweetie, how's your week going? Dad and I want to come to Boston next month. Maybe we can grab dinner." No mention of the wedding, no explanation, no apology, just casual small talk, as if she hadn't just celebrated her youngest daughter's marriage the weekend before. While I sat at home with an unworn dress and an undelivered gift, I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. For 32 years, I've always replied to my mother instantly. I've always been available, always considerate, the daughter who never caused trouble. For the first time in my life, I didn't answer. I turned the phone face down on the table and walked to the window. The Boston skyline flickered in the dark, beautiful and cold. Out there somewhere, my sister was a married woman, and my parents were likely looking at wedding photos, reliving a beautiful day. My family was whole and happy, and I was here alone, wondering how I became completely invisible to the people who were supposed to love me most. Something shifted inside me that night. It wasn't explosive or dramatic. It was quieter than that, like a thread snapping somewhere deep down, a thread I didn't even know had been holding everything together. I took one last look at the emerald green dress and shut the closet door. I wasn't going to cry, not yet. First, I needed answers. I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, checking my phone, then staring at the ceiling again. The hours crawled by as if mocking me. By 2 a.m, I found myself scrolling through Lauren's wedding photos again. I studied every face, looking for something. A hint of guilt, a flicker of unease. Any sign that someone noticed the space where I should have been standing was empty. But everyone was smiling. Everyone looked happy. Without me, the celebration was flawless. By 4, I started drafting texts to my mother. I wrote and deleted at least a dozen. Some were angry, some were pleading, some just asked a single word. Why? But I didn't send any of them. I didn't know what to say because I couldn't comprehend what had actually happened. By 6, I gave up on sleep entirely. I made coffee, which tasted like absolutely nothing, and sat at the kitchen table, watching the sky turn from gray to pink, then to light blue. The emerald green dress still hung on the closet door. I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. By 7:30, I made my decision. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for an explanation. I wasn't going to let them control the narrative. I was going to call my parents and demand an answer. I dialed their landline at 8:30, knowing they would both be awake. Thursday mornings in the Caldwell household were entirely predictable. Dad would be reading the news on his tablet, and Mom would be brewing her second cup of coffee. They would be comfortable, relaxed, and enjoying their routine. My mother picked up on the third ring. Her voice was bright, cheerful, completely normal. "Zoe, what a wonderful surprise. You're calling so early." No tension, no guilt, no awkwardness, just pleasant morning banter, as if everything in the world was exactly as it should be. I forced myself to remain calm. I wanted to give them the chance to bring it up first, to own what happened, to explain. "Hey, Mom, how are things?" "Oh, wonderful. Just exhausted from the weekend, you know." She laughed lightly. "Weddings take so much out of you." The word hit me like a physical blow. She said it so casually, as if I had been there, as if I knew exactly what she was talking about. "Actually," I said, keeping my voice level despite my heart hammering against my ribs, "I don't know. I wasn't there." Silence. 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. Then, my mother let out a soft sigh. It was the kind of sigh she used when she was tired of explaining the obvious to a difficult child. "Oh, sweetie, I wondered when you'd call about that." No, I am so sorry. No, there was a terrible mistake. No, let me explain. Just resignation. An admission that she had been waiting for this conversation and had already decided how to handle it. My father's voice came over the line, meaning he'd been listening the whole time. Zoe, don't make a big deal out of this. It was Lauren's big day and she wanted it to be stress-free. The words felt like a physical strike. Stress-free. As if my presence was a source of stress. As if I were a problem to be managed rather than a sister to be included. What does that mean? I asked. How am I stressed? My mother took the phone back, her voice shifting into that familiar tone, the one she used when I was a child making an unreasonable demand. Patient on the surface, entirely condescending underneath. You know how you are, honey. You can be very intense. You have opinions on everything and you analyze things. Lauren just wanted one day where she didn't have to worry about managing anyone's reactions. Managing my reactions. The phrase echoed in my mind. As if I had ever caused a scene at a family gathering. As if I had ever done anything but smile, help, and accommodate. I wouldn't have caused trouble, I said. I would have just been there to celebrate her. Maybe not outwardly, my father chimed in, but we would have felt it. You have an energy about you, Zoe. It's critical. We just decided it would be a more peaceful day without that. More peaceful without me. My own parents had decided that their youngest daughter's wedding would be better, happier, and lighter if I simply didn't exist in it. We talked about it as a family, my mother continued, as if that made it better. We thought you'd actually be relieved not to have to go. You're always so busy with work. We didn't want to add to your plate. That's not true, I said. You know that's not true. I took time off, I bought a dress, I have the gift wrapped and ready. Well, my mother's voice cooled. It's over now. No use dwelling on it. Lauren had a beautiful day. Derek is wonderful, and we can all move forward. Move forward. As if my exclusion was just a minor scheduling conflict. As if they hadn't erased me from a major milestone and lied to the entire extended family to cover it up. I hung up without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. It was something else. It felt like the first spark of real anger I'd allowed myself to feel in years. I sat in the kitchen, my cold coffee completely untouched, and thought about my life. I thought about every time I had stepped up for this family, every time I had given, helped, and sacrificed. I started remembering other things, moments I had pushed aside, made excuses for, forgiven and forgotten. Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I told the family I'd drive down Wednesday evening. Tuesday night, I got a text from Lauren. Hey, Mom said you're too busy to make it. Don't worry, we understand. Confused, I called immediately. Mom laughed it off. Oh, I just assumed you were working. We didn't want you to feel pressured. I drove down anyway, but when I arrived, the guest room had been given to a cousin. I slept on the couch. My 30th birthday. No party, no dinner, no card. I brought it up to Mom a week later, trying to keep it light. Her response, "Oh, honey, you never make a fuss about birthdays. I assumed you wanted to keep it low-key." Lauren got a surprise party for her 30th. 50 guests, a 3-tiered cake, and endless social media posts. Grandma Eleanor's funeral. I handled everything. The arrangements, the obituary, the flowers, the reception. I paid for most of it out of pocket because Lauren was going through a rough patch and our parents were too grief-stricken. After the service, I overheard Mom telling a relative, "Zoe is just so strong, nothing rattles her." She said it like a compliment, but what I heard was, "She doesn't need us. She can handle it. We don't have to worry about her." That was it, wasn't it? They didn't see me as a person with needs. They saw me as a resource. Capable, steady, unbreakable. Someone to solve problems, manage crises, and write checks. Not someone who might feel lonely or hurt or look for a place to belong. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements. I needed to see it in numbers, in black and white. Lauren's credit card debt 3 years ago, $12,000. She promised to pay me back, she never did. My parents' roof repair 4 years ago, $8,000. They said they'd repay me when Dad's bonus came in. The bonus never materialized. Grandma's medical bills before she passed. The treatment's insurance wouldn't cover. I paid nearly $15,000. Lauren's car insurance while she was between jobs. I covered it for 2 years, $4,800. The deposit on Derek's engagement ring. Lauren wanted something special so Derek would look good. And because she asked, I contributed $3,000. I added it up. Nearly $43,000 over 5 years, and that didn't even account for the time, energy, and emotional labor of being the family fixer. I wasn't a sister. I was a bank account with a heartbeat, and the interest was my dignity. My phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Janet. "Can we meet? There's something you need to know, and I can't say it over the phone." I stared at the message. Aunt Janet had always been the quiet observer in the family. She was Mom's sister, always watching, rarely speaking. I replied, "What is it?" She answered quickly, "It's about your grandmother's estate and why you didn't receive anything." My heart skipped. Grandma's estate? The family told me there was nothing left, that the house had been remortgaged to pay for medical care and funeral costs, that there was no inheritance at all. I texted back, "Grandma didn't leave anything. Mom said the house was gone." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Then, "That's not true, Zoe. There is a lot more to it. But I need to tell you in person. Can we meet this Saturday?" I looked over at the emerald green dress still hanging on my closet door. Then I stood up, took it off the hanger, folded it neatly, and placed it into a donation bag. I wouldn't be needing it anymore. The coffee shop Aunt Janet chose was in Cambridge, tucked away between a used bookstore and a dry cleaner. It was the kind of place where no one would recognize us, perfect for a conversation you didn't want anyone else to overhear. I arrived 15 minutes early. I ordered a black coffee and sat in a booth near the back, watching the door. My leg bounced under the table, my coffee sitting untouched as it grew cold. The shop smelled of cinnamon and old paper, with soft jazz playing from invisible speakers. It all felt far too peaceful for what I felt was coming. Aunt Janet walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. She looked older than I remembered. The lines around her eyes deeper, the color gone from her cheeks. She held a worn leather folder tightly against her chest, as if it contained something incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous. She slid into the booth across from me. She didn't order anything, just looked at me for a long time. Her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite read. "Before I say anything," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to know that I should have told you sooner. I've been a coward, Zoe. I'm sorry." My stomach sank. Whatever this was, it was far heavier than missing a wedding. "Tell me," I said. She took a deep breath. "Let me start with the wedding. What your mother told you about thinking you'd be uncomfortable, about Lauren wanting a stress-free day. That wasn't the whole truth." She paused, gathering herself. "I was at the bridal shower 4 months ago. I was in the hallway and I overheard Lauren talking to your mother in the kitchen. Lauren was upset, agitated. She didn't know I was outside." "What did she say?" Aunt Janet's jaw tightened. "She said, I don't want her there. She always turns everything into the Zoe show." The words felt like cold water thrown in my face. "Lauren said that about me?" Aunt Janet nodded. "Your mother tried to reason with her, saying people would ask questions if you weren't there. And Lauren said, then tell them she's busy. Tell them she sent a gift. I don't care. I just don't want her standing next to me looking like that." Looking like what? Perfect. Accomplished. Highlighting how much of a mess I am. I leaned back against the booth. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too warm. I had spent my entire life trying to be responsible, trying never to be a burden, and my sister resented me for it. "Your sister has always been envious of you, Zoe," Aunt Janet said gently. "You just never saw it because you were too busy taking care of everyone. You have a career, savings, a stable life. Lauren has always felt like she was living in your shadow. But I never made her feel that way," I said. "I never compared us. I was always helping her." "I know, but that's not how she saw it. Every time you helped her, it was a reminder that she needed help. Instead of gratitude, she built up resentment. And your parents never corrected her. They never told her that what she was asking for was wrong. They just chose the path of least resistance." The path of least resistance. I was made out to be the difficult one, the obstacle, simply by existing. "So the story about me sending a gift," I said slowly, "the excuse about the work emergency, that was all planned? It was your mother's idea. She told everyone at the wedding that you were tied up with a massive project but had sent a beautiful gift and a lovely card. She even described it, a crystal vase from a boutique in Boston." I let out a laugh, completely devoid of humor. She had the details ready. She practiced. Yes, and everyone believed it. Why wouldn't they? Zoe is so busy with work. Zoe always has something going on. It fit the image they've projected about you for years. Did no one question it? I asked. No one thought it was strange? A few of us did. Your cousin Megan asked where you were, but your mother shut it down quickly, saying you'd become very distant lately and that the family was trying to give you space. The room felt like it was tilting. They hadn't just excluded me. They had rewritten reality to make me the one who abandoned the family. I was the one who chose not to show up. The narrative was completely flipped. Aunt Janet reached into her leather folder. There's more, Zoe, and this is the part I've carried for too long. She pulled out a stack of documents, yellowed paper, legal letterhead, and a faded envelope with my name written on it. Your grandmother, she said. My mother. She left a will. A real notarized will filed with an attorney. I didn't know it existed until last year when I was going through some old boxes. I stared at the papers. I don't understand. Mom told me Grandma didn't leave anything. She said the house had a reverse mortgage and all the money went to her care in the funeral. Aunt Janet shook her head slowly. There was no reverse mortgage. The house was paid off decades ago. But Eleanor didn't just own that house. She owned a small apartment in the North End, right in downtown Boston. A 2-bedroom. She bought it in the 70s when prices were low. In today's market, it's worth about $450,000. The number didn't even register at first. $450,000? An apartment I had never heard of? She left it to you, Zoe. Aunt Janet pushed a document across the table. The will states, and I quote, "To my granddaughter, Zoe Marie Caldwell, who has always shown me her own reflection, steady, generous, and far too often overlooked." My grandmother's words, written for me about me. I never received this, I whispered. I had no idea any of this existed. I know, because the letters from the estate attorney were sent to your parents' house. Remember, you were staying with them during the funeral services? But by the time the letters arrived, you were back in Boston. Someone intercepted them. Aunt Janet nodded grimly. She pushed another paper across the table. According to the county property records I pulled, that apartment was sold 2 years ago for $420,000. I looked at the sheet. A deed transfer, a record of sale. At the very bottom, I recognized a signature. Richard Caldwell, acting as power of attorney for Zoe Marie Caldwell. My father sold my inheritance. How is that possible? My voice cracked. I never gave him power of attorney. I never signed anything. Aunt Janet pulled out one final document. A power of attorney form dated 3 years ago. At the bottom was my signature. Except it wasn't. The handwriting was close. Someone had studied how I write, but the loop on the Z was too tight, the tail on the Y too short. I knew my own signature. I had never signed this document. I had never even seen it. This isn't mine, I said. I assumed as much, Zoe. I believe your father forged your signature to gain control of the property, and then he sold it. $420,000. Gone, without my knowledge, without my consent. Where did the money go? I asked. Aunt Janet hesitated. I don't have proof, but I have suspicions. She paused. That was the exact time Lauren was in deep financial trouble. It wasn't just credit card debt. Her ex-boyfriend, the one before Derek, had pulled her into some terrible investments, mostly gambling. She owed nearly $400,000. The numbers were too close to be a coincidence. The timeline matched perfectly. They used my inheritance, I said slowly, to pay off Lauren's gambling debts. Aunt Janet reached across the table and took my hand. I've given you everything I have. The will, the sale records, the power of attorney. What you do with it is up to you. But Zoe, this isn't just about a wedding anymore. This is fraud. This is theft. Your parents committed a crime against you. I carefully gathered the papers and slid them back into the folder. My hands were steady now, even though my heart was pounding. I need time to think, I said. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. I should have been from the start. I stood up to leave, the folder tucked under my arm. It felt much heavier than it looked, or maybe that was just the weight of all the secrets inside. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lauren. Hey, been thinking about you lately. We should get together soon, miss you. 3 days ago, she had intentionally excluded me from the most important day of her life. Now she wanted to get together. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I took a screenshot. I had a feeling that from now on, I was going to need to keep records of everything. Sunday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with the leather folder Aunt Janet had given me spread wide open. The documents were arranged in neat rows. The will, the forged power of attorney, the property transfer records, the sale price, $420,000, the money that belonged to me. My first instinct was to call them, to scream over the phone demanding answers. It was to drive to their house, throw these papers in their faces, and watch them try to explain how they could steal from their own daughter. But I stopped myself. I had spent 32 years reacting to this family, accommodating them, explaining myself to them, giving them the benefit of the doubt. And every single time, they used my honesty against me. They would reshape the conversation, twist my words, and make me feel like I was the one being unreasonable. If I went to confront them now, unprepared and emotional, they would do it again. They would align their stories, destroy evidence, and turn the rest of the relatives against me before I could even show my proof. No, this time was different. This time I was going to be strategic. I opened my laptop and began tracing every financial connection between myself and my family. I spent nearly all of Sunday and Monday piecing together the full picture, and what I found made me sick to my stomach. There was a monthly automatic transfer of $600 to my parents. It was labeled Health Insurance Assistance. I had set it up 3 years ago when they complained about rising premiums. I told myself it was temporary. It had never stopped. Lauren's car insurance was still on my policy, costing $180 a month, drafted directly from my checking account. She had begged me to add her years ago when she couldn't afford her own, and she had never transitioned to her own plan. My mother's various streaming services were tied to my credit card. Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, HBO, $62 every single month that I had simply overlooked. My father's golf club membership had been renewed last year. I had covered it once when he was short on cash, and it had automatically renewed on my card again this year for $800. Lauren's gym membership was still in my name. I had co-signed for her when her credit was bad. She had never taken over the responsibility, $90 a month. I added it up. Every month, over $1,100 was flowing from my accounts to people who couldn't even bother to invite me to a wedding. On Tuesday, I called my insurance company. I removed Lauren's car from my policy, effective immediately. The representative asked if I wanted to notify the other driver, and I said no. On Wednesday, I logged into my online banking and canceled the automatic transfer to my parents. No explanation, no warning, just stopped. On Thursday, I disconnected my mother's streaming services from my credit card and reported the card as lost, changing the account number completely. On Friday, I called the golf club and informed them that Mr. Richard Caldwell would need to provide his own payment method moving forward. I waited for the calls, the angry texts, the demands for an explanation, but my phone remained completely silent. No one had noticed yet. They were so accustomed to my money flowing toward them that they didn't even realize the faucet had been turned off. They would notice soon enough. Friday night, Maya Chen arrived at my apartment with Thai food and a bottle of wine. It was a tradition we had kept since graduate school. Friday nights were for venting, laughing, and fixing the problems of the world over pad thai and Pinot Grigio. Maya was 34, a litigation attorney with a mind like a steel trap, and zero tolerance for nonsense. She was the only person outside of my family who knew about the wedding situation. Now, sitting cross-legged on my couch, she was the only one who knew about the inheritance. She listened to the entire story without interrupting. It was a skill she had as a lawyer, but also as a friend. She let me talk until I ran out of words. Then she set her wine glass down and looked at me with those sharp, observant eyes. "Zoe, I need you to listen to me carefully." I nodded. "You have spent your entire life making sure everyone else was comfortable. You fixed their problems, you wrote checks, you showed up whenever they called. And what did it get you? A forged signature and a fake excuse about why you weren't at your sister's wedding." "I know," I said softly. I leaned back, pulling away from my laptop screen. My mind was racing, trying to reconcile two completely conflicting realities. On one hand, Lauren was a victim. She had been manipulated by her ex-boyfriend, trapped in a mountain of debt, and rescued by our parents, who went out of their way to hide where the money actually came from. But on the other hand, Lauren was a co-conspirator. She had deliberately cut me out of her wedding, and she had lied to the entire family to cover up my absence. She was living a completely debt-free life, and I was the one who had unknowingly paid the price for it. "Did Lauren know?" I asked. "Did she know the money came from my inheritance?" "I don't think she did," Aunt Janet replied. "But Zoe, she was 35 years old. You don't just accept nearly $400,000 without asking a single question. She didn't want to know. And honestly, that blindness is a choice in itself." "What about Derek? Does he know any of this?" Lauren told him she had a rough financial past, but that it was all handled. He thinks she started fresh. He has absolutely no idea that his wife's clean slate was bought with stolen money. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of my apartment for a very long time. Every single piece of the puzzle finally fit. The envy Lauren showed during the wedding planning made total sense now. If I had been standing next to her on that altar, she wouldn't have been able to ignore the cost of her happy ending. She couldn't look at me without being reminded of the secret she was trying to hide from herself. I weighed my options. I could go to the police, file charges, and watch my parents face serious legal consequences. I could confront my family directly, demand my money back, and brace for the fallout. I could hire a lawyer and build a case to negotiate from a position of power. Or I could do nothing, swallow the loss, and protect whatever was left of this family. The fourth option was off the table immediately. I had spent 32 years doing nothing, swallowing losses and protecting this family, and look where it got me. I called Maya back. I need a lawyer, I said. Someone who handles estates and fraud. Someone who won't even blink when I tell them my father took $400,000 from me. Maya didn't hesitate. I know exactly who you need. Her name is Caroline Webb. She's tough, incredibly smart, and she doesn't intimidate easily. I'll text you her number. There was a brief pause over the line. Then Maya said something that hit me right in the chest. Zoe, once you take this step, there is no turning back. Are you ready? I looked around my apartment. I looked at the folders of evidence piled on my desk, my untouched cold coffee, and the life I had built completely on my own while my family did nothing but take, and take. I've spent my whole life turning back, I said. Now I'm ready to move forward. Right after I hung up, my phone buzzed with a new text. I looked at the screen and almost laughed out loud. It was from Lauren. Hey, haven't heard from you in a bit. Derek and I were just talking about having a small post-wedding celebration. Nothing major, just immediate family. We think your lake house would be absolutely perfect for it. Can we borrow it next weekend? Let me know. She attached 3 emojis. A heart, a house, and a bottle of champagne. Not a single mention of the wedding I missed. No apology, no acknowledgement that anything was wrong. Just a request to use my lake house, the one asset they hadn't managed to take from me yet. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I took a screenshot and added it to the evidence folder. Tomorrow I would call the lawyer. Tonight, I was going to let them wait. On Friday morning, I woke up to the pale winter sunlight filtering through my blinds. Lauren's text from the night before was still glowing on my screen. I read it one more time, letting every single word sink in. Immediate family. Seeing that phrase now felt completely different. I was family enough to pay off her massive debts, family enough to cover my parents' insurance, and family enough to bail everyone out of every crisis for the past decade. But I wasn't family enough to get a wedding invitation. I got out of bed and brewed some coffee, strong and black, just the way I like it. As I moved around the kitchen, my hands were steady and my thoughts were clear. The evidence folder was now locked safely inside a fireproof safe, with digital backup secured in the cloud. I was fully prepared. But before I replied to Lauren, I had one more call to make. Caroline Webb answered on the second ring. Her voice was professional and direct, exactly what I needed. Ms. Caldwell, Maya told me you'd be calling. She said it was urgent and involved a family matter. I've cleared 30 minutes for you. I gave her the streamlined version of the story. Being excluded from the wedding, the forged power of attorney, the apartment sold behind my back, the $420,000 that vanished into my sister's debts, and the mountain of documents I had gathered. When I finished, a long silence stretched over the line. And you have the paperwork to prove all of this? She asked. Everything. The original will, the intercepted attorney letters, the forged power of attorney, and the property transfer records. I also have a witness, my aunt, who can testify to what the family claimed. There was another pause before Caroline spoke again, her tone becoming more measured and serious. Ms. Caldwell, you have a very strong civil case for recovery. You also have grounds to file criminal charges for forgery, fraud, and theft by deception. But I need to ask you an important question. What is your ultimate goal here? Is it justice, financial recovery, both, or something else? I thought about it. Revenge would only feel good for 5 minutes. Criminal charges would completely ruin my parents, and financial recovery would simply bring back what was already mine. I want what belongs to me, I finally said, and I want them to know they can never take anything from me ever again. Then let's meet on Monday. Bring everything you have. And Ms. Caldwell, do not confront them yet. Do not reply to any demands. Let them wonder. Silence is an incredibly powerful tool. I smiled coldly. Actually, I have one request I need to reply to. But don't worry, I'll keep it brief. After hanging up, I stared at Lauren's text. Caroline said not to confront them. But was saying no really a confrontation? I considered my options. If I ignored the text, Lauren would call, then Mom would call, then Dad. The pressure would keep building until I gave in. If I made an excuse saying the house was under renovation or already rented out, they would push back, ask when it would be free and try to reschedule. They would keep pushing until they got what they wanted. But what if I just said a flat, direct no without a single explanation? They wouldn't know how to handle it. I had never refused them anything before. I had never set a boundary without wrapping it in layers of apologies and justifications. My entire life had been spent explaining myself, making them comfortable with my choices, and bending myself into whatever shape they expected. What if I just stopped? I picked up my phone and typed out a single sentence. No, the lake house isn't available. I didn't add, I'm sorry. I didn't offer alternative dates. I didn't explain. One sentence, sent. And then I waited. 3 minutes passed. 5 minutes. I watched the screen as the 3 typing dots appeared. Lauren replied, "What do you mean it's not available? You're not even using it. We're just asking for one weekend." I texted back, "It's not available." This time, Lauren's response came even faster. "Zoe, please don't be difficult. Derek's family is coming from out of state, and we already told them we had a place for everyone. You can't do this to us." I noticed her choice of words. Us, not me. She was already framing this as Zoe against the family, Zoe against the newlyweds. Zoe, the obstacle standing in the way of everyone's happiness. I replied calmly, "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just not lending out my house." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times. Then a massive paragraph came through. "This is so typical of you. You've always been like this, holding things over people's heads and making everyone feel guilty. I don't know why I expected anything different." I read the text twice. Holding things over people's heads. The irony was almost unbearable. For years, I gave, and gave. I had never held anything over anyone, and I hadn't even asked for the money they owed me. I sent one final text. "I'm not going to argue about this. The answer is no." Then, I muted the conversation. I didn't block Lauren, not yet. But whatever came next, I was going to read it on my own terms. Exactly 8 minutes later, my phone rang. The screen showed it was Mom. 8 minutes. That was how fast the Caldwell family machine operated. I could have let it go to voicemail, but I wanted to hear it. I wanted to know exactly what they would say. "Hey, Mom." Her voice no longer had that sweet, casual tone from her recent texts. This was a different voice, the one I grew up with whenever I didn't perform exactly the way she wanted. It was cold, controlled, and sharp with disappointment. "Zoe, I just got off the phone with Lauren and she is absolutely devastated." I'm sure she is. "She said you refused to let them use the lake house." "Zoe, that is incredibly selfish. They are newlyweds and they have guests coming. You're punishing your sister over some silly misunderstanding about the wedding." I let the word hang in the air between us. "Misunderstanding. The invitation," Mom continued, her voice tightening. "There was a mix-up with the dates. It happens all the time. Lauren feels terrible about it. But you can't handle your emotions by withholding things from your own family." Withholding. As if a private property bought entirely with my own hard-earned money was something I was obligated to share with them. "Mom," I kept my voice steady, "I'm not withholding anything. I'm simply choosing not to lend out my house. Those are 2 completely different things." Her tone sharpened. "You're being petty. This isn't like you at all. What is wrong with you?" For a split second, I considered telling her everything. I could bring up the apartment right now, the forged signature, and the $400,000. I could listen to her scramble for excuses in real time. But Caroline's voice echoed in my head. Silence is a powerful tool. "Nothing is wrong," I said. "I just don't want to lend the house. I have to go, Mom." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the rush of adrenaline. For the first time in my life, I had just hung up on my mother. Over the next 3 hours, my phone lit up constantly. I briefly unmuted Lauren to check the damage. "I can't believe you're doing this. Derek is so disappointed and his mom was really looking forward to the lake. Thanks for ruining everything." An email from Dad came through next. "Zoe, your mother is very upset. Give her a call back. Let's handle this like adults." Then another text from Lauren. You know what? Fine. We'll find somewhere else. But don't expect me to act like this never happened. And finally, one from Mom. I hope you're happy. Lauren is in tears right now. As I scrolled through the messages, I noticed one glaring omission. Nobody asked why. Nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody acknowledged that they had excluded me from the wedding, and nobody offered a genuine apology. Every single message was entirely about their inconvenience, their plans, and their feelings. I had said a single word, no, and suddenly I was the villain. For years, when they took from me, I was the good daughter. The moment I refused, just once, I became the selfish, petty person who ruined everything. I needed some air. I walked the streets of Boston for an hour, the cold wind stinging my cheeks and lungs. I walked aimlessly, just keeping myself moving to let my body process what my brain was still trying to accept. By the time I got back to my apartment, something deep inside me had settled. The shaking was gone, and the usual guilt that followed any family conflict, the guilt I had been trained to feel, was completely absent. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began organizing the evidence folder for my Monday meeting with Caroline. My phone buzzed again. It was a number I didn't recognize. Zoe, it's Derek. Can we talk? I feel like there are a lot of things I don't understand. I stared at the text. Derek, Lauren's husband, the man who knew absolutely nothing about his wife's past debts, my stolen inheritance, or the secrets buried beneath their flawless new marriage. I replied, we can, but not today. I'll reach out when I'm ready. The stakes were getting higher. On Saturday morning, I woke up to 17 new notifications on my phone. The family offensive had officially begun. The first was an email from my father sent at 11:47 the previous night, with the subject line, "A word about family." I opened it to find a long, rambling essay about blood ties and duty. He wrote that my grandmother would be deeply ashamed of my behavior. He reminded me that they had raised me and that I owed them better. He explained that Lauren had always been more fragile and that I knew the strong had to support the weak. He wrote, "That is what family means." The second was a voicemail from my mother left at 7:23 a.m. Her voice was heavy with dramatic tears. She claimed she couldn't sleep, my father couldn't sleep, and Lauren had been up all night crying to them on the phone. She insisted she didn't know where any of this was coming from. "We've always been such a close family," she said. "If this is about the wedding, we can talk, but punishing everyone doesn't solve anything." Then came Lauren's texts, scattered like shrapnel throughout the night. At 12:15 a.m. "Fine, if you want to be this way, go ahead." At 1:48 a.m. "You know what? I actually regret even asking you. I should have known you'd find a way to make this all about yourself again." At 3:22 a.m. "Mom told me you've been acting strange lately, canceling dinners and not returning calls. Are you having some kind of mental breakdown?" At 6:55 a.m. "Derek wants to meet with you. I told him there's no point, but he's insisting. Don't go feeding him your victim narrative." Victim narrative. I couldn't help but let out a sharp, bitter laugh into my quiet apartment. I was the one who had been robbed, excluded, and manipulated. Yet somehow, I was the one spinning a victim narrative. On Saturday afternoon, I received an unexpected phone call. My cousin Megan, whom I hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years, suddenly called to check in. "Hey, Zoe," she said, her voice dripping with sweet concern. "Lauren mentioned things have been a bit tense between you two lately. I just wanted to see how you were doing. You know, about the lake house. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Lauren's been under so much stress with the wedding, maybe you could reconsider." I recognized the tactic immediately. They were deploying the flying monkeys. Relatives who hadn't bothered to pick up a phone in years were suddenly deeply invested in my well-being, and every single one of them was steering the conversation to the exact same destination. Zoe should back down, Zoe should apologize, Zoe should share the lake house, and Zoe should stop being so difficult. On Saturday night, my Uncle Robert, who had forgotten my last 3 birthdays, sent an email telling me that life was too short to hold grudges. "Your grandmother always said family comes first," he added. I didn't reply to any of them. I read every message, took note of it, and filed it away in my mind. But I gave them absolutely nothing back. No explanations, no defenses, just silence. Never in my life had they coordinated this effectively for anything. Not for my graduation, not for my promotions, and certainly not when I was hospitalized with pancreatitis at 26 and left entirely alone for 3 days because everyone was too busy. But the moment I refused to lend out my lake house, suddenly everyone had my number. On Sunday morning, Derek texted again. I know this is awkward, but I really think we need to talk. Just the two of us without telling Lauren, please. Staring at the message for a long moment, I finally agreed to meet him on Monday afternoon. I chose a coffee shop in Back Bay. It was neutral ground, public, crowded, and completely removed from any family spaces. It was the perfect place for a conversation that required witnesses. Derek was already there when I arrived. He looked awful. There were dark circles under his eyes and a thick stubble on his jaw, looking like he hadn't shaved in days. His hands were wrapped tightly around his coffee mug, as if he needed the warmth just to keep himself upright. He didn't look like a glowing newlywed at all. He looked like a man whose world was starting to fracture. Thanks for meeting me, he said as I sat down. I know this is strange. You said there were things you didn't understand, I replied. Like what? He stared into his coffee for a moment before answering. The wedding, not inviting you. Lauren told me it was your choice. She said you had a massive project at work and that you two weren't really close to begin with. But then I heard how your mother described you at the reception, like you were a problem. The stories don't align. He looked up at me, his eyes searching, confused, and desperate for an explanation that made sense. And then the lake house happened. I watched Lauren completely fall apart, as if you had stolen something from her. It wasn't disappointment, Zoe. It was anger, a complete sense of entitlement. When I asked her why it mattered this much, she couldn't give me a straight answer. I kept my expression entirely neutral. What do you want to know, Derek? He leaned forward. I want to know who I actually married. Because the woman I proposed to and the woman I've seen this past week do not match up at all. I considered how much to reveal. Derek was an innocent bystander in this mess. But he was still Lauren's husband. Anything I said could easily go right back to her, giving them time to prepare a defense. But looking at his face, I saw real confusion and real pain. He wasn't trying to manipulate me. He was here because his marriage was in serious trouble, and he knew I held the answers. I decided to give him just enough information to open his eyes, but nothing more. The rest he would have to discover on his own. I told him the truth about the wedding. I explained how I had found out about it from Aunt Janet 3 days after it was already over, and how my mother had gone around telling everyone that I was simply too busy with a work emergency, even describing the fictional crystal vase I had supposedly bought them. I sent a gift for a wedding I was never even invited to. I explained how I'd been deliberately cut out, and how the entire extended family had been systematically fed a lie to cover it up. Derek's face went entirely pale. She told me you knew. She told me you were completely fine with not coming. I found out from my aunt 3 days after it happened. He set his coffee cup down, his hands visibly shaking now. I'm so sorry, he whispered, rubbing his face in disbelief. I am so incredibly sorry. If I had known, I would have never... God, what else has been kept from me? And then he said something that made my heart stop. Lauren mentioned once that there was some family money from the sale of an apartment downtown. She said the money went toward remodeling your parents' house. I asked her if you got a share, and she told me you didn't need it. She said you had your career, your savings, and that you were doing perfectly fine. The apartment. Lauren had mentioned it to Derek, but she'd spun a completely different story, telling him the money was for a remodel instead of her gambling debts. Either Lauren was genuinely in the dark, or she was actively lying to her own husband. I chose my next words very carefully. Derek, that apartment money was never used for a remodel, and there is a lot more to that sale than meets the eye. What do you mean? I looked him straight in the eyes. Ask Lauren what really happened to the money from that apartment. Don't ask your in-laws, ask Lauren, and when she answers, watch her face. On Monday evening, I went back over to Maya's apartment. I needed to talk to the one person who would give it to me straight, no matter how harsh the reality. Maya listened intently as I laid everything out. The family's text offensive, the meeting with Derek, and the twist about Lauren's alternate story for the apartment. This is fascinating, Maya said, leaning forward. So Lauren either didn't know the truth about where the money came from, or she knew and covered it up to keep Derek in the dark. If she truly didn't know, then your parents lied to her too, telling her they just magically found a way to handle it. She paused, letting the thought settle. But Zoe, even if Lauren didn't know the exact source, she accepted over $400,000 without asking a single question. She built a brand new life on top of that. A fresh start, a good husband, a beautiful wedding. At a certain point, choosing not to ask is a conscious decision. She looked at me grimly. And from a legal standpoint, this is way past family drama now. Your father committed forgery, and both of your parents committed fraud. Whether Lauren knew it or not, she benefited directly from the proceeds of a crime. We are talking about serious felony territory here. I'm meeting with Caroline Webb tomorrow morning, I said. I'm bringing everything. Maya nodded. Good. But Zoe, once you walk into that office and start building this case, you cross a line. The family you've known your whole life, it's over. I walked home through the dark Boston streets, the biting wind stinging my cheeks. I kept thinking about Maya's words. The family you've known is over. But did that family ever really exist? Were the Sunday dinners, the holiday cards, the casual I love yous at the end of phone calls ever real? Or had I always just been a bank account with a heartbeat to them? A problem-solving machine who didn't even deserve a seat at a wedding table? Maybe the family I thought I was protecting never existed in the first place. Maybe I was mourning a bond that was a total illusion. When I got home, I opened the evidence folder and began printing every single document for tomorrow's meeting. Right as the printer started whirring, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Derek. I asked Lauren about the apartment. She got incredibly defensive and walked out of the room. Then she made a call. I overheard her say, Zoe knows. I don't know what that means, but I feel like something is horribly wrong. I stared at those two words, Zoe knows. The game was changing. They realized I wasn't in the dark anymore. Good. At 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning, I walked into Caroline Webb's law firm. It was located in a beautiful converted brownstone near the financial district, filled with dark wood paneling, deep leather chairs, and framed degrees on every wall. The entire place radiated an atmosphere of quiet authority and serious consequences. I was carrying a leather briefcase I'd borrowed from Maya, packed with every statement, document, and piece of evidence I'd gathered over the last 2 weeks. My hands were perfectly steady, but my mind was completely focused. The receptionist offered me coffee, but I politely declined. My stomach was tied in knots. I couldn't have swallowed a drop. A few minutes later, Caroline Webb stepped out of her corner office. She was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a sharp, professional bun, and incredibly piercing eyes behind elegant glasses. She gave my hand a firm, no-nonsense shake. Not warm, but not cold either. Purely professional and capable. Ms. Caldwell, she said, gesturing toward her office. Maya speaks very highly of you. She gave me the basic outline, but I want to hear it in your own words. Start from the wedding. In my own words. I couldn't remember the last time anyone in my life had asked to hear my perspective. I opened the briefcase and began laying the documents across her desk like playing cards. I was fully ready to see this through. I walked Caroline through the entire timeline. The deliberate exclusion from the wedding and the cover story my mother invented, Aunt Janet's revelation about Lauren's underlying envy, my grandmother's original will leaving the apartment to me, the intercepted legal letters, the power of attorney with my forged signature, the $420,000 sale record, the involvement of the notary, Linda Parsons, who was a close church friend of my mother, and the timeline that aligned perfectly with Lauren's financial crisis. Caroline examined every single piece of paper with absolute method and quiet focus. She took meticulous notes on a legal pad, occasionally pausing to ask a clarifying question. This signature, she said, pointing to the power of attorney form. You are completely certain you never signed this? I've never seen this document before in my life. That is absolutely not my handwriting. The notary, Linda Parsons. Have you had any personal interactions with her? She's a longtime friend of my mother from church. She's been to our house for Christmas dinners. And your aunt is willing to testify to what she discovered and what your mother told her? Yes, she gave me these documents specifically so I could protect myself. After 45 minutes, Caroline finally set her pen down. She took off her glasses and looked straight at me. Ms. Caldwell, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of estate fraud I have seen in 15 years. The words hung heavy in the room. She calmly broke down the legal reality. Forging a power of attorney in Massachusetts is a serious felony that carries significant prison time. An unauthorized property transfer creates massive civil liability and criminal exposure. Given the sheer amount of money involved, grand larceny was firmly on the table, and if the notary knowingly participated, she was facing severe criminal penalties as an accomplice. Your father committed a major crime, Caroline said plainly, and your mother is, at the very least, a co-conspirator. The evidence here is more than enough to file criminal charges if that's the path you choose. There is also plenty of ground to launch a civil suit to recover the full value of the property plus damages. I felt the immense weight of those options settling on my shoulders. Criminal charges, real prison time for my own father. Before we talk strategy, Caroline continued, I need to understand what you want out of this. This isn't just about what is legally possible. It's about what outcome you are prepared to live with. She laid out the options clearly. Option 1 was full criminal prosecution. I could take the evidence of forgery and fraud directly to the district attorney, which would likely result in multiple felony charges against my father. The fallout would mean public exposure, potential prison time, and the complete destruction of whatever remained of my family. Option 2 was a purely civil lawsuit. I could sue to recover the value of the apartment plus damages, forcing a settlement or going to trial. It would be expensive and lengthy, but it would keep the matter out of criminal court. Option 3 was a structured legal demand. I could have Caroline send a formal demand letter to my family, requiring full repayment of the funds under the explicit threat of options 1 and 2 if they failed to comply. It was the fastest route and gave me the maximum amount of control. Most clients in your position start with option 3, Caroline advised. It's the least destructive path, but it only works if the other side genuinely believes you are prepared to escalate. Are you ready for that? I nodded slowly. I didn't need destruction for the sake of destruction, but I was absolutely done letting them escape the consequences of their actions. Then, Caroline raised another point. There's one more thing, she said. What about your sister? Based on what you've told me, Lauren might not know the exact origin of the money. If we move forward, especially if criminal charges are involved, she will find out, her marriage could end, and her life will unravel. I thought about Lauren. I thought about the deep envy that led to me being cut out of her wedding, the blatant entitlement over my lake house, and the text accusing me of playing a victim. But I also remembered Lauren at 16, crying over her first heartbreak and asking for my advice, and Lauren at 25, calling me in the middle of the night to pick her up from a terrible date. Before she became this unrecognizable, entitled person, she was just my little sister. Do you want Lauren to know the truth? Caroline asked. And if so, do you want her to hear it from you, from me, from your parents, or in a courtroom? I considered it carefully. I used to think it was my job to protect Lauren from everything. I've done it her whole life. But she's 35 years old now. She accepted a massive sum of money she didn't earn, built a brand new life on top of it, and never asked a single question. And when it came to the happiest day of her life, she chose to erase me entirely. I took a breath. I want my parents to tell her the truth. They built this lie, and they should be the ones to explain it. Give them one chance to confess before everything becomes a matter of legal record. Caroline nodded, writing it down. We can include that as a non-negotiable term in the demand letter. Full disclosure to Lauren Caldwell within the settlement window. If they refuse, we escalate. She looked up at me. And what about Derek? He's already suspicious. I thought about Derek. He was the one who reached out, asked questions, and confronted Lauren, only to receive a panicked reaction. He was entirely innocent. Yet he had married a woman whose fresh start was funded by theft. If this goes to court, Caroline warned, Derek will be subpoenaed to testify. He will discover everything, not just the apartment, but Lauren's entire financial history, the gambling, the ex-boyfriend, the debts. His entire understanding of his wife will dissolve on the witness stand. He deserves to know, I said, but not from a lawyer and not in a courtroom. Can we give them a window? Before any legal action goes public, give my parents and Lauren the opportunity to tell Derek the truth themselves. Let them keep at least a shred of dignity by coming clean before they face total public exposure. Caroline raised an eyebrow slightly. You are being far more generous than most clients I see in this situation. I'm not doing this for revenge, I told her. I'm doing this to set things right. If they choose to lie again, that's entirely on them. But I won't tear Derek's life apart without giving him the chance to hear the truth from his own wife first. Caroline looked at me for a long moment. You are a very resilient woman, Miss Caldwell. Over the next hour, we drafted the formal demand letter. It was addressed directly to Richard and Diane Caldwell. The letter explicitly cited the forged power of attorney, attached copies of the unauthorized sale of the property, and demanded full repayment of the $420,000, plus interest and legal fees. It also mandated a complete disclosure to Lauren Caldwell regarding the true source of the funds used to clear her debts. They were given exactly 7 calendar days to respond. Failure to comply would result in a formal criminal complaint to the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, alongside a civil lawsuit for fraud, forgery, and grand larceny. Caroline added one final crucial clause. I'm also including a formal preservation notice. If they destroy a single piece of evidence, emails, bank statements, anything, that constitutes obstruction of justice, which is an entirely separate felony. She printed out the letter and slid it across the desk. I read it once, then twice. This single piece of paper was going to permanently end the family dynamic I had known my entire life. But that dynamic had ended a long time ago. Maybe it never truly existed. I picked up the pen and signed my name. Caroline nodded with a look of genuine respect. I'll have this sent via certified mail and electronic delivery. They will receive it by tomorrow afternoon. As I stood up to leave, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. Zoe, this is Linda Parsons. Your mother gave me your number. I really think we need to talk before this goes any further. Please, there are things you don't know. Linda Parsons, the notary. My mother's close friend from church. The woman who had stamped her official seal onto a forged signature. Now she wanted to talk. I stared at the text, then showed the screen to Caroline. Her eyes narrowed with sudden interest. Don't reply yet, but definitely don't delete it, Caroline said. This just got very interesting. On Wednesday morning, I met Linda Parsons at a quiet diner in Quincy. It was far enough outside our usual circles that we wouldn't be recognized. Caroline had advised me to just listen, make no promises, and record the conversation if possible. Linda looked exactly as I remembered from those occasional Christmas dinners. In her late 50s, an active churchgoer, wearing a floral blouse and pearl earrings, looking entirely respectable. But as she wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, they were noticeably trembling. She looked like a woman who hadn't slept in days. Thank you for meeting me, she began before I could even sit down. I know I have absolutely no right to ask anything of you, but the moment I heard Diane panicking about lawyers, I knew everything was unraveling. I can't go to jail for them, Zoe. I won't. I slid into the booth across from her. Tell me exactly what happened, Linda. She took a shaky breath, her voice fluttering as she began to speak. 3 years ago, your mother called me. She was completely frantic, saying there was a massive family emergency. She told me that you were completely overwhelmed by grief, unable to handle any paperwork, and that you had explicitly authorized your father to manage the estate. Linda's eyes darted around the diner, scanning the room for anyone she might know. She asked me to notarize a power of attorney form, claiming it was just a formality to speed things up. Your father signed it right in front of me, but your signature was already on the document. I didn't look closely at it. Diane said it was all agreed upon. I trusted her. We've been friends for 30 years. Did you know what the power of attorney was actually for? I asked. Did you know they were selling my property? Not at first, but later on Diane let it slip. Something about Lauren's situation finally being resolved. I put the pieces together myself. But by then, it was too late. I was already involved. I studied her face. The guilt was real, and the fear was completely genuine. But I needed to know if she was actually trying to do the right thing, or just desperate to save herself. Why are you telling me this now, Linda? Because last week I overheard Diane on the phone. She was in an absolute panic. She said something that made my blood run completely cold. What did she say? Linda leaned forward, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. She said, if Zoe finds those emails, we are completely finished. What emails? Zoe, what kind of paper trail do they have? I didn't know about any emails. But my mother's sheer panic made it clear that there was a digital trail I hadn't discovered yet. Concrete proof that was keeping her awake at night. Linda continued, her voice barely audible over the diner noise. She mentioned that the whole arrangement was documented. She's terrified you're going to find proof that Lauren knew a lot more than she's letting on. The words hit me like a physical punch. Lauren knew a lot more than she was letting on. My mother's terror meant Lauren wasn't nearly as innocent as everyone claimed. She had clearly known the money was compromised, even if she didn't know the exact details of the theft. I'm willing to testify, Linda said suddenly, desperation taking over her voice. I will state on the record that I notarized the document without verifying your signature. I will confirm that Diane and Richard coordinated the entire thing. Just please, if there is any way to keep me out of a courtroom, I will cooperate completely. That's not up to me, I told her plainly. My lawyer will be in touch with you. But Linda, if you are lying to me, or if this is some kind of setup to protect my mother, it's only going to make things much worse for you. Her eyes filled with tears. I know what I did was wrong. I've known it for 3 years. I just didn't have the courage to fix it. I am so sorry, Zoe. I am so incredibly sorry. I left the diner with only one thought burning in my mind. The emails, I needed to find them. By Thursday afternoon, the demand letter had been officially delivered. I knew this because my phone hadn't stopped vibrating since noon. My father left a voicemail at 2:17 p.m. His voice was incredibly tight and controlled, the exact tone he used when he was terrified but refused to admit it. Zoe, we received a letter from an attorney. This is a massive misunderstanding. We need to talk about this as a family. Please call me back. My mother sent a text at 2:34 p.m. How could you do this to us? To your own parents? We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? 7 minutes later, another text followed. You are breaking my heart. I haven't stopped crying. Your father is sick with worry. Are you happy now? Then Lauren texted at 3:15 p.m. What on earth is going on? Mom just called me in tears. She says you're trying to sue them? For what? Call me right now. I didn't reply to a single one of them. I let them sit with the weight of that letter. I wanted them to realize that frantic words and emotional manipulation weren't going to make this go away. They weren't panicking because they were innocent and confused. If they were innocent, they would be asking questions, not casting blame. They were panicking because they were guilty, and they had just realized that I held all the cards. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was Derek. I need to see you tonight if possible. I found the emails. I called him back immediately, and he answered on the very first ring. His voice sounded entirely hollow, like a man who had just broken down and was trying desperately to hide it. I found them, Zoe. I found everything. He explained what happened after the demand letter arrived at my parents' house. The family had descended into complete chaos. Lauren and her mother had been on the phone arguing for an hour behind closed doors, screaming at each other. When Lauren finally went to take a shower, Derek did something he had never done before in his life. He opened her laptop. Her email account was logged in. There was a folder labeled Family Private, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Inside, I found exchanges between Lauren and your parents from 3 years ago. He took a shaky breath and continued. They were discussing the entire debt situation, looking for a way out. There's an email from Lauren to your mother that says, "Are you completely sure Zoe won't find out? I cannot have this hanging over me as I start my new life." I closed my eyes. There it was, concrete proof of Lauren's full awareness. Your father replied, Derek continued. He wrote, "It's already handled. The apartment is sold and the funds have been moved. Zoe has absolutely no idea about the inheritance, and she never will." And then Lauren wrote back, "Thank God, I can finally move forward. Derek never needs to know about any of this." Derek's voice completely broke down. She knew Zoe. She might not have known every single legal detail, but she knew enough. She knew money was appearing out of nowhere to rescue her. She knew it had everything to do with you, and she explicitly asked your parents to make sure you never discovered it. A heavy silence stretched between us. "I don't even know who I married," Derek whispered. "I thought she was starting fresh. Turns out she was just burying a crime." "Derek," I said carefully, "do you have copies of those emails?" I took screenshots. I forwarded everything to my own account before she got out of the bathroom. "Can you send them to me?" He hesitated for a long time. "If I do this, if I give you the proof that incriminates my own wife, everything falls apart. My marriage, her life, our entire future." I understood his hesitation, but he needed to face the reality of who he was dealing with. "Derek, do you really want to spend the rest of your life with someone who built your entire relationship on a lie?" Someone who watched her own sister get robbed and then asked her parents to make sure the truth stayed buried? Another painful silence followed. Then I heard him let out a long, defeated breath. I'll send them over, but Zoe, when this is all over, I need to be in the room. I need to look her in the eyes and understand how she could do this. Come to the settlement meeting when my lawyer sets it up. I'll make sure you're there. She isn't who I thought she was, Derek said quietly. None of them are. 10 minutes later, the screenshots arrived in my inbox. Black and white evidence documenting 3 years of betrayal. I read through the exchange twice, every word confirming the exact suspicions I had tried so hard to dismiss. Lauren knew money was being used to bail her out. She had explicitly asked our parents to keep me in the dark. She called it her fresh start, as if my inheritance was nothing more than a cleanup crew for her reckless mistakes. And my exclusion from the wedding wasn't just driven by envy. It was driven by deep guilt. Lauren couldn't face me on that altar knowing exactly what she had allowed to happen. She couldn't have me standing by her side while carrying the weight of that silence. She wasn't protecting herself from my intense personality. She was protecting herself from my gaze, from the risk that I might look at her and see straight through the lie. I forwarded the screenshots to Caroline Webb, along with a summary of Linda Parsons' confession. At the very top of the email, I wrote a single sentence. "We have everything. Let's finish this." Caroline's response came back 20 minutes later. Understood. I will contact the Caldwell's attorney tomorrow morning. We are scheduling a mandatory meeting. Bring Derek, bring your aunt. It's time for them to face what they've done. On Friday morning, my phone rang. It was Lauren. Her voice was completely different now. No longer angry or defensive, but incredibly small, frail, and terrified. "Zoe," she whispered, "I need to tell you something. Before this meeting, before anyone else gets involved, I need you to know that I never wanted things to happen this way." I let the silence stretch between us for a long moment. When I finally spoke, my voice was entirely cold and calm. "Then show up to the meeting, Lauren. Say it to my face. Say it in front of Derek and Mom and Dad, and then we'll see what you really wanted." I hung up before she could say another word. The final meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 2 o'clock. I walked into the main conference room at Caroline Webb's office. A massive mahogany table dominated the space, with untouched water glasses placed precisely at each seat. The pale winter light filtered through the large windows, overlooking the Boston skyline. Caroline was already seated at the head of the table. Aunt Janet sat to my right, having insisted on being there. "I was there when this family dynamic started," she told me firmly, "and I'm going to be here when it ends." Derek arrived a few minutes later. He looked like he had aged 5 years in a single week, with deep shadows under his eyes and a heavy shadow on his jaw. He was still wearing his wedding ring, but he kept twisting it around his finger, as if it no longer fit. He gave me a quiet nod and took a seat at the far end of the table. Then the door opened again and my family walked in. My father led the way. Richard Caldwell, 63 years old, wearing his absolute best suit like a suit of armor. My mother followed closely behind, clutching her handbag tightly against her chest, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Lauren walked in last. She looked much smaller than I remembered, pale, uncertain, and completely avoiding eye contact as she sat down. They had brought an attorney with them, a nervous-looking man in a cheap suit who clearly wanted to be anywhere else in the world. No one said hello. No hands were shaken. The room was heavy with the suffocating weight of 3 years of lies. Lauren's eyes finally met mine for a brief second. I saw a flicker of fear, guilt, and perhaps a shadow of the sister she used to be. Then it vanished, replaced by a defensive, cautious blankness. Caroline Webb cleared her throat, instantly taking total command of the room. "Thank you all for coming. We are here because my client, Zoe Caldwell, possesses undeniable evidence of fraud, forgery, and grand larceny committed against her by members of her immediate family. The purpose of this meeting is to reach a structured settlement before we submit a formal criminal complaint to the district attorney and initiate civil proceedings." My father immediately cut her off, his voice defensive. "This is completely ridiculous. We are a family. Whatever misunderstanding has occurred here can be handled without lawyers and empty threats." Caroline's voice remained perfectly calm and unyielding. "Mr. Caldwell, let me stop you right there. We are well past the point of discussing a misunderstanding. We possess the forged power of attorney. We possess the property transfer records. We possess a sworn statement from the notary involved, and we possess—" She paused, looking straight at Lauren. "The emails." The color drained entirely from my sister's face. Her eyes darted instantly to Derek, but he refused to look back at her. My mother tried to intervene next, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Whatever you think you've found, there is a rational explanation. We were only trying to protect—" Caroline cut her off firmly. "Mrs. Caldwell, you will have your opportunity to speak. But first, my client has something to say." Every eye in the room turned to me. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice level and calm. This was the moment I had been leading up to, not for revenge, but for the absolute truth. 3 weeks ago, I began, I found out my little sister got married without me. I wasn't accidentally forgotten. I was deliberately cut out. Mom told the entire extended family that I had sent a beautiful gift and my best wishes. It was a complete lie. I only found out the wedding had actually happened when Aunt Janet called to ask why I wasn't there. I looked at each of them in turn. My father stared intently at the table, my mother dabbed at her eyes, and Lauren sat frozen in her seat. When I asked why, I was told that I was too intense, that I made people uncomfortable, and that Lauren just wanted a stress-free day. For 32 years, I have been the one who stepped up, the one who paid for things, and the one who fixed every crisis. And my reward was being completely erased from my only sister's wedding. I let the weight of those words sink into the room before continuing. But that was just the beginning, because when I started looking into things, I uncovered something far worse. 3 years ago, Grandma Eleanor left me an apartment downtown that I didn't even know existed. The letters from the estate attorney were intercepted. Dad forged my signature on a power of attorney form, and that apartment was sold for $420,000. Every single penny of which went to pay off Lauren's gambling debts. Lauren's head snapped up, her voice rising. "Gambling debts? What are you talking about? I don't have gambling debts." My mother reached over, frantically grabbing her arm. "Lauren, sweetie, let me explain." But Lauren pulled away, her voice cracking. "Mom, what is she talking about?" I provided the answer myself. $380,000, Lauren. Your ex-boyfriend, Craig. The investments that turned out to be sports betting and poker. The debts that followed you, and the people who were calling you with threats. Lauren's face completely collapsed. "How do you know about that? That was supposed to be—" She turned to our parents, desperation in her voice. "You told me you found a way. You said it was all taken care of. You never told me it was Zoe's money." My mother was crying openly now, her composure completely shattered. "We were protecting you, both of you. Zoe didn't need that apartment. She has her career and her savings. You were in desperate need of help. We did what any loving parents would do." I shook my head slowly. "You weren't protecting anyone. You stole from one daughter to enable the mistakes of the other, and then you lied to both of us." Caroline slid a stack of printed documents across the mahogany table. These are the email records between Lauren and her parents from 3 years ago. They explicitly document Lauren's awareness that a large sum of money was being brought in to clear her debts, and they show her explicitly requesting that Zoe never find out about it. Lauren stared at the papers as if they were dangerous. Right at the top was her own email, her own words, printed clearly in black and white. "Are you completely sure Zoe won't find out? I cannot have this hanging over me as I start my new life." Derek spoke for the first time. His voice was incredibly quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. "You wrote those words, Lauren. I found them on your laptop. You knew." Lauren opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Derek stood up slowly, pushing his chair back. The harsh scraping sound against the floor was deafening in the silence of the room. "When I proposed to you," he said, looking down at her, "you told me you had a difficult financial past, but that it was completely resolved. You said you wanted a fresh start. I believed you. I loved you." He picked up the printed emails. "But this isn't a fresh start. This is a massive cover-up. You took over $400,000 that belonged to your own sister, your sister Lauren. You used it to wipe away your mistakes, and then you excluded her from our wedding because you couldn't bear to look her in the eyes knowing what you had allowed to happen." Lauren's voice became frantic, pleading. "Derek, I didn't know it was her inheritance, I swear. My parents told me they had savings. They said—" Derek cut her off, shaking his head. "You didn't ask, Lauren. You didn't want to know. And honestly, that is almost worse." He held up his phone. I read all the emails, every single one. You aren't innocent here. You were incredibly careful to keep it hidden. Lauren completely broke down, loud, heavy sobs filling the conference room. But for the first time in my entire life, I felt absolutely no urge to comfort her. Derek reached down to his left hand. Slowly and deliberately, he slipped off his wedding band and placed it quietly on the table. The small metallic click echoed in the silence. I fell in love with a person who doesn't exist, he said flatly. The woman I married was just a story you told me, and I can't spend the rest of my life living in a complete fiction. He turned to me, his expression softening slightly. I am so sorry for how awful this is, Zoe. You deserved so much better from everyone in this room. And then he walked out. The heavy door clicked shut behind him with an absolute finality. Lauren continued to cry, my mother wrapping her arms around her and stroking her hair. My father sat staring blankly at the table, completely defeated, unable to utter a single word. I stood up and looked at my parents one last time. 数年かけて、私から42万ドルを盗み、署名を偽造し、いくつもの重大な罪を犯した。そして、ローレンの結婚式に私を招き、家族の一員として迎える機会があったとき、あなたたちは私を存在しないものとして扱うことを選んだ。My mother looked up through her tears. We always thought you were fine, Zoe. You were always the strong one. Lauren was the one who needed, I am fine, I said clearly, but not because of how you raised me. I am fine because I forced myself to survive your neglect. You didn't protect Lauren. You turned me into a bank account and turned her into someone who never had to grow up or face reality. And now, look at what it's cost you. Caroline stepped in, her voice professional and decisive. We have the formal settlement terms prepared. You have exactly 72 hours to sign the agreement and begin the repayment process. If you fail to comply, we will submit the full criminal case to the district attorney on Friday morning. I took one last look at the people in the room, my crying mother, my broken father, and my devastated sister. I never wanted things to end this way, I told them. But you made your choices. For 3 years, every single day, you chose deception over love. Now you have to live with the consequences. I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Lauren's broken, faint voice call out, Zoe, please! I kept walking, and I didn't look back. 2 weeks passed after that confrontation, and my apartment felt entirely different. It didn't feel emptier, just quieter. The evidence folders were gone, safely filed away in Caroline's office. The emerald green dress had been donated weeks ago, and the wedding gift I'd bought for Lauren still sat in the back of my closet, fully wrapped, a relic of a future that never happened. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I braced myself for a dramatic phone call, a sobbing voicemail, or one of my family members showing up at my front door to scream or beg. But the silence from my immediate family was absolute. No angry texts, no guilt-ridden emails, just stillness. I filled my days with a normal routine. I went back to work, catching up on projects I'd neglected during the chaos. I cooked actual meals for myself instead of just grabbing whatever was fastest. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the entire night. I spoke to Maya twice, and Aunt Janet once. I stayed completely off social media. I didn't need to look. I expected to feel a grand sense of victory, or maybe an overwhelming sadness. But mostly I just felt a deep sense of relief. It was like dropping a massive weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. On Wednesday morning, a text from Caroline Webb flashed across my screen. It's over, they signed. Can you come in tomorrow to finalize everything? On Thursday, I found myself sitting across from Caroline in the exact same conference room where the confrontation had taken place. This time it was just the two of us. She slid the executed settlement agreement across the table. The financial terms were clear. Richard and Diane Caldwell were required to sell their property in Concord. The proceeds of the sale would go directly to bailing out my stolen inheritance, paying me back the full $420,000, minus legal fees and adjustments. The payment had to be completed within 90 days, and a formal lien had been placed on their house to ensure compliance. The legal terms were just as straightforward. I agreed not to pursue criminal charges against my parents. The notary, Linda Parsons, had signed a separate cooperation agreement in exchange for immunity, and all parties agreed to a strict non-disparagement clause. There was no formal admission of wrongdoing in the paperwork. That was standard legal language. But the massive payment itself was all the admission I needed. They didn't fight it, Caroline told me. Their lawyer made it very clear that going to court meant public exposure, real prison time, and legal fees they couldn't afford. They surrendered within 48 hours of our meeting. I flipped to the final page and signed my name. This time, it was my actual signature. Not a forgery, not a replication. Mine. Caroline watched me with a look of quiet respect. How does it feel? Like closing a door I didn't know was still open. She nodded slowly. There's one more thing. Lauren's attorney contacted me separately. She wanted to pass along a letter to you. I told them I would ask if you were willing to accept it. I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Fine. The letter arrived the next day. It was 3 pages long, filled with Lauren's familiar, messy handwriting, the exact same script she used to write in my birthday cards years ago. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and read it. Zoe, the letter began, I don't know if you'll even read this. If you throw it away, I don't blame you. But I have to say these things, even if you never reply. She wrote about her ex-boyfriend, Craig, and how the gambling had started with small amounts before completely consuming her life. She wrote about how terrified and desperate she was when she ran away from that relationship, admitting she had even thought about ending her life before our parents told her they could get her out of trouble. I didn't ask where the money came from, she wrote. I know that's not an excuse, but I was so desperate to believe it was over that I wouldn't let myself think about it. I told myself it was just family helping family. And then came the part that made me brace myself. You always had everything so perfectly together. Your career, your apartment, your savings. I know it sounds like envy because it was. Standing next to you, I always felt like a total failure. Instead of fixing my life, I pushed you away. I am so sorry you found out the truth this way. I'm sorry about the wedding, and I'm sorry for everything. But I also need you to understand the pressure I was under. I read the letter twice, watching the words blur together. I'm sorry, but... Every single apology came with a condition. Every confession was wrapped in an excuse. I folded the paper up, slid it into a drawer, and closed it. I wasn't going to reply. There was nothing left to say. Over the next week, Aunt Janet kept me updated on the fallout. The extended family had found out. The news hadn't come from me, but the massive ripples of the settlement were impossible to hide. The house was officially up for sale, Derek had moved out, and Lauren was staying on a friend's couch. The whispers in their church community, the neighborhood gossip, and the talk among relatives who had always suspected something was off with the Caldwells had begun. Your Uncle Robert called me yesterday, Aunt Janet told me over the phone. First time in years. He wanted to know if it was true that Richard forged documents and stole your money. I told him it was absolutely true. He hasn't spoken to your father since. The shunning from the family had already started. Richard's older brother, Uncle Thomas, completely cut contact. Diane's other sister sent a formal email expressing her deep disappointment. My cousin Megan, the one who had texted me demanding I give up my lake house, went completely silent. Their church community was distancing themselves too. Linda Parsons wasn't even attending services there anymore. They are entirely isolated now, Aunt Janet said. The house they have to sell was supposed to be their retirement dream, and now it's just collateral for their actions. Your mother calls me crying every few days. I listen, but I don't offer comfort. I can't find a way to say something that is both honest and kind. I don't want them to suffer, I said quietly. I just wanted what belonged to me. I know, sweetie, but sometimes the truth just has its own consequences. I asked about Derek. Aunt Janet had heard from him directly. 3 days after the confrontation, he filed for a formal separation. He packed his things, moved out of Lauren's apartment, and was currently staying with his brother in Connecticut. The divorce paperwork was already in motion. He called me, Aunt Janet said. He actually wanted to thank you. He said finding out the truth was devastating, but living a lie would have been much worse. He's planning to move away and get a completely fresh start, maybe to California where he has some family. As for Lauren, she's in a very bad place. She lost her husband, her parents' support is crumbling, and she's facing the reality that her fresh start was funded by theft. She's finally seeing a therapist now. Whether it helps, I don't know. I thought about Lauren at 16, crying over her first heartbreak, and Lauren at 22, calling me to rescue her from a bad situation. The little sister from before all of this. I don't hate her, I said. I wish I did. It would make things easier. Love and anger can live in the exact same heart, Zoe. Aunt Janet replied softly. You don't have to choose between them. I'm not even angry anymore. I just feel finished. I spent so many years trying to hold this family together. I'm just tired, Aunt Janet. I'm so tired. Then rest, sweetie. You've earned it. On Friday evening, I was sitting at home with my laptop open to my bank account. A notification appeared at the top of my screen. Wire transfer received. $380,000. From Caldwell Family Trust in dissolution. Memo, final settlement. I stared at the numbers for a long time. $380,000. My grandmother's apartment returned to me in digits. 3 years of lies, balanced by a bank statement. A lifetime of being the family bank account, finally reversed. I thought this moment would feel like a grand triumph, that there would be champagne and celebrations, but it didn't feel like that at all. It just felt like an ending, not a happy one, but a necessary one. I closed my laptop, walked over to the window, and looked out at the Boston skyline. It was the exact same view I'd looked at for years, but somehow it looked entirely different now. What settled over me wasn't joy, and it wasn't sadness. It was the quiet peace of finally knowing exactly where I stood. My phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Hear the wire went through. You okay? I replied, I'm going up to the lake house this weekend. Want to come? Her response came back instantly. Absolutely. Pack the wine. I'll bring the food. Let's celebrate your freedom. I smiled. A small, genuine smile. The first real one in weeks. Freedom. I had never looked at myself that way before, but maybe that's exactly what this was. I started packing my bags. The lake house was waiting, and for the first time in my life I was going there entirely for myself. On Saturday morning I packed a small overnight bag and grabbed a bottle of wine. Maya had insisted I keep things simple. As I merged onto Interstate 93 North and left the city behind, the Boston skyline began to fade in my rearview mirror. The drive to New Hampshire was just under 2 hours. I had taken this route dozens of times, but today felt completely different. Every single time before, I had driven with a sense of obligation, preparing for family gatherings that only drained me, or holidays that left me feeling emptier than when I started. Gatherings where I forced a smile, resolved crises, and wrote checks without ever hearing a single thank you. As I drove, the landscape shifted. The concrete structures turned into dense forests, and the highway signs pointed to smaller and smaller towns. The crisp air coming through the cracked window smelled of pine, cold water, and something that felt like pure freedom. When I bought this house 5 years ago, I had a dream. I imagined Thanksgiving dinners around a long wooden table, Lauren's future children running on the dock, and my dad grilling on the porch while my mom read by the fireplace. I had built a sanctuary for a family that never actually existed. Today I wasn't running toward an obligation. I was running toward myself. When I turned down the gravel road leading to the house, I saw a familiar car already parked in the driveway. Maya had beaten me there. The lake house sat quiet and solid right at the water's edge. A thin trail of smoke drifted from the chimney, and the low afternoon sun cast long shadows across the wraparound porch through the bare trees. The lake itself was a deep gray, perfectly still like a mirror reflecting the winter sky. Maya was sitting on the porch, wrapped in a thick blanket, holding a steaming mug. "Took you long enough, Caldwell?" she called out as I stepped out of the car. "I've been here an hour. I already claimed the best bedroom." I let out a laugh, a real, genuine laugh from a deep place that hadn't been touched in weeks. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and warmth. Maya had started a fire in the stone fireplace, laid out cheese and crackers, and opened the wine I brought. The flames crackled loudly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Then, I heard another vehicle approaching, its headlights sweeping across the windows as it pulled into the driveway. Maya smiled. "Hope you don't mind. I invited a +1. Aunt Janet stepped out of the car, carrying a covered dish and wearing a smile I hadn't seen on her face in years. By the time night fell, the three of us were completely settled in the living room. The fire kept us warm as the first stars appeared over the lake outside the window. Aunt Janet placed the dish on the coffee table. Your grandmother's recipe, chicken and rice. Eleanor made this every single Sunday when I was growing up. She paused, her eyes glinting in the firelight. I thought it was time to bring a piece of her back into this house. I looked down at the food, thinking about Grandma Eleanor, the woman who had left me an apartment I never received, whose final gift had been stolen and transformed into a lie. But she was also the woman who kept every single birthday card I ever sent her, bound together with a rubber band. The woman who called me her most reliable child, the one who truly saw me when everyone else looked right through me. We sat around the fire and ate dinner together. The meal tasted like comfort, simpler times, and a love that didn't come with any strings attached. We didn't talk about the settlement. We didn't talk about Lauren or my parents or the money. We talked about Aunt Janet's garden and the tulips she was preparing to plant for spring. We talked about a ridiculous case Maya was handling at work and the absurd judge she had to deal with in court last week. We talked about my plans for the house. Maybe updating the kitchen, and definitely fixing that rotting dock down by the water. Listening to them laugh, I realized this was exactly what I had always wanted. Not a massive staged family gathering or a performance of togetherness. Just this. The people who genuinely wanted to show up. The people who actually saw me. After dinner, we took our glasses out onto the back deck. The lake stretched out before us, dark and endless under a blanket of stars. The biting wind stung our cheeks, but no one wanted to go back inside. The quiet was absolute, and the sky was completely clear. Maya spoke first. So what's next, Caldwell? You got the money, and you closed that chapter. What's the plan? I thought about it for a long moment before answering. I've been thinking about that a lot. The lake house needs real work. The dock is rotting, and the kitchen needs an update. For a while, I thought about selling it, just walking away to a place with no memories and starting over completely. I looked out at the water. But this house was never the problem. My expectations were the problem. I built this sanctuary for people who didn't deserve it. Maybe now it's time to rebuild it for the people who do. Aunt Janet smiled warmly. Your grandmother would have loved that idea. She always said that a home isn't built from walls and a roof. It's built from the people you choose to let inside. I looked back out at the dark lake. I spent so many years trying to earn my place in that family, working harder, giving more, staying quiet, making myself smaller and more accommodating. I honestly believed that if I just did enough, they would finally see me. But it doesn't work that way. You can't earn love from people who have already decided not to love you. Maya's voice was gentle. So what did you learn? I learned that family doesn't have to be the people who share your blood. Family is the people who don't demand that you bleed for them. It's the people who show up when you're broken, not just when you're useful. It's this. I gestured to the two of them, to our wine glasses and blankets, and to the stars reflecting perfectly on the calm water. Aunt Janet raised her glass. To the family we choose. Maya clinked her glass against it. To finally being free. I finished the toast. To fresh starts. We stayed out on the deck until the cold finally drove us back indoors. That night I slept deeply, without a single dream, or a trace of the anxiety that had followed me for as long as I could remember. On Sunday morning, I woke up before the others. The gray morning light was filtering through the curtains, and the house was entirely still, except for the soft sound of the water lapping against the shore. I brewed coffee, strong and black, wrapped a blanket around myself, and walked out onto the porch. A light mist hovered over the surface of the water, and the bare trees looked beautiful stretching into the pale sky. In the distance, a solitary bird called out. I used to wake up every single day carrying a mountain of anxiety. The very first thought in my mind every morning was a checklist of obligations, whose feelings I needed to protect, who I needed to call, and what crisis I needed to solve for someone else. Today, I woke up and my first thought was absolutely nothing. Just silence, just peace. My phone was sitting face down on the table inside. No new messages from my parents, no desperate pleas from Lauren. The very silence that used to make me feel abandoned now felt like total liberation. I had lost a mother, a father, and a sister. I lost the Sunday dinners, the hollow holiday traditions, and the illusion of belonging. But I had won back myself, my financial security, my home, my truth, and the unconditional love of the people inside this house. I hadn't won a victory. When a family falls apart, there are no real winners. But I had survived it. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just managing a crisis. I was making a choice. I heard footsteps behind me, and Maya walked out wrapped in a giant plush robe, holding her coffee mug. Got room for one more out here? I smiled, a real effortless smile. Always. We sat together in silence, watching the sun rise fully over the lake as the mist burned away, and the world around us woke up. I thought about everything that had brought me to this exact spot. The wedding I was cut out of, the stolen inheritance, the years of systematic lies, and the confrontation that shattered everything. And I thought about the lesson at the heart of it all. I used to think that the absolute worst thing that could happen to me was losing my family. I was wrong. The worst thing was losing myself trying to keep them. For 32 years, I bent over backward, compromised my values, wrote checks, and swallowed my own words. I made myself small so they could feel powerful. And the moment I finally said a single no, just one boundary, one small act of self-protection, they called me selfish, labeled me cruel, erased me from a wedding, stole my inheritance, and then convinced themselves they were the victims. But here is what I've finally realized. You can't abandon someone who never truly held on to you. You can't betray someone who never actually saw you. And you can't lose a family that never truly accepted you for who you are. I'm Zoe Caldwell. I'm 32 years old. I lost my parents, my sister, and the story I used to tell myself about who we were as a family. But sitting here, watching the sun rise over the lake I bought with my own hard work, surrounded by the people who actually show up, I know the absolute truth. I didn't lose anything that truly belonged to me, and everything I have now is exactly what I chose, every single piece of it.